Welcome back to our channel, where we explore the lives and legacies of influential figures in history. In today's episode, we delve into the inspiring story of Thomas Sankara, a charismatic African leader who fought for the emancipation of Africa from colonial rule and Western powers. We'll also examine whether Ibrahim Traore of the present day follows in Sankara's footsteps. So, let's get started. First, let's look into the life, legacy, and values of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara, born December 21, 1949, Yoko, Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso, died October 15, 1987, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, military officer and proponent of Pan-Africanism who was installed as president of Upper Volta, later Burkina Faso, in 1983 after a military coup. He held that position until 1987, when he was killed during another coup. Next, we'll also examine his early life, education, and career. Sankara's Roman Catholic parents wanted him to be a priest, but he opted for a military career instead. In 1970, at the age of 20, Sankara was sent for officer training in Madagascar, where he witnessed a popular uprising of students and workers that succeeded in toppling Madagascar's government. Before returning to Upper Volta in 1972, Sankara attended a parachute academy in France, where he was further exposed to left-wing political ideologies. In 1974 he earned much public attention for his heroic performance in the border war with Mali, but years later he would renounce the war as useless and unjust. By the early 1980s, Burkina Faso was being rocked by a series of labor union strikes and military coups. Sankara's military achievements and charismatic leadership style made him a popular choice for political appointments, but his personal and political integrity put him at odds with the leadership of the successive military governments that came to power, leading to his arrest on several occasions. In January 1983, Sankara was selected as the Prime Minister of the newly formed Council for the Salvation of the People, Conseil de Salut du Peuple, CSP, headed by Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo. This post provided him with an entryway into international politics and a chance to meet with leaders of the non-aligned movement, including Fidel Castro, Cuba, Samora Machel, Mozambique, and Maurice Bishop, Grenada. Sankara's anti-imperialist stance and grassroots popularity increasingly put him at odds with conservative elements within the CSP, including President Ouedraogo. Sankara was removed as Prime Minister in May and arrested once again. In August of 1983, Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's close friend and fellow army colleague, led a group that freed Sankara, overthrew the Ouedraogo regime, and formed the National Council of the Revolution, Conseil National de la Révolution, with Sankara as its president. Sankara declared the objectives of the democratic and popular revolution to be primarily concerned with the tasks of eradicating corruption, fighting environmental degradation, empowering women, and increasing access to education and health care, with the larger goal of liquidating imperial domination. During the course of his presidency, Sankara successfully implemented programs that vastly reduced infant mortality, increased literacy rates and school attendance, and boosted the number of women holding governmental posts. On the environmental front, in the first year of his presidency alone 10 million trees were planted in an effort to combat desertification. On the first anniversary of the coup that had brought him to power, he changed the country's name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, which roughly means Land of Upright People in Mossi and Dioula, the country's two most widely spoken indigenous languages. Despite the great strides that were made, there was growing dissent in the country, partly because of economic problems and opposition from traditional quarters to some of Sankara's more progressive social policies. His administration gradually lost popular support, and internal conflict within his government grew as well. In October of 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup led by Compaoré and two others, and Compaoré went on to rule Burkina Faso until popular unrest led him to resign in 2014. Let's address the question of whether Ibrahim Traore is a direct descendant of Thomas Sankara. In September 2021, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres expressed concern about the return of military coups in Africa and questioned the international community's lack of unity in the face of military interventions. 8 months after taking power by force, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba in Burkina Faso was ousted on the night of October 1. He was introduced to the population as the henchman of France in light of the ongoing anti-French sentiment narrative in the region, a narrative that has sustained the dialectal equation of the dynamic of the balance of power in the African Sahel and Africa in general in the super and regional powers' big game. New regional and sub-regional geopolitical parameters are shaping Africa's politics and geopolitics landscape. France and Russia are already engaged in a battle for the sphere of influence in several Western and Central African countries, which Paris still considers its backyard. Captain Ibrahim Traore, 34, was Burkina Faso's corps commander of the Heir artillery regiment in the north. He is now the new strongman of the country. A figure that mirrors the regional politics and geopolitics of another flamboyant captain, Thomas Sankara, who shook Burkina Faso's sub-regional national security imperatives 37 years ago, challenging Paris' role and control. This occurred at a time when Chad was facing a bloody civil war stemming from ethnic tensions, in which Paris and Moscow pushed Tripoli and N'Djamena in a costly, raging proxy war imposed by the first Cold War-era circumstances. The new military authorities in Ouagadougou are displaying a sense of security toward the international community. Western super and regional powers did condemn the coup. Nevertheless, Paris is pushing the sub-regional economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, organization to soften the mood, calling for the return to the constitutional order by the end of 2024, an answer that was given quickly by the new Burkina Faso strongman Captain Ibrahim Traore. The return to normal constitutional order will be even before this date if the situation allows it. Hence, our wish is that it can be done before the year 2024. Captain Ibrahim Traore made it clear that he will be reaching out to other partners who are ready to help the country's war on terror. Nevertheless, he did not mention Paris as a partner in this delicate task since France has seen severe setbacks in Mali. There are other partners who would join Burkina Faso and other neighboring countries in the African Sahel. Meanwhile, demonstrators in Burkina Faso's large cities did take to the streets following the coup and chanted anti-French slogans, waving Russian flags. An issue that makes the French leaders very concerned, the rise of anti-French sentiment in the region, is not happening only in Burkina Faso but also in Mali, Niger and even in Central Africa in addition to Maghreb countries, all of which were under French colonial rule at one time or another. A week ago, the French authorities did mention the possibility of withdrawing their military forces from Gambia, another military operation setback for French President Emmanuel Macron. Is this the end of the French hegemony in the African Sahel? The French military and diplomatic decline in the region are enhancing the analysts' arguments regarding a new balance of power that is reshuffling the cards in the region. Countries like China, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates and even Israel are already positioning themselves against the French influence and hegemony in Africa in a move aiming to downsize the European powers' capabilities in the region. Russia's ties to Burkina Faso date back to the times of the late Captain Thomas Sankara, who, before being assassinated, established excellent and trustworthy relations with Moscow in a partnership that was totally based on the then-young military leader's foreign policy ideological determinants. At the same time, the latter used the opportunity to settle in the region, providing military equipment and materials, and as a result, nowadays Russia is just replacing and further supporting its pawns that were moved 3 decades ago, knowing that the winds of the region's geopolitical context are blowing in Moscow's direction. Yet, the new head of the patriotic movement for safeguarding and restoration looks dynamic and buoyant like the late Sankara. Could Captain Ibrahim Traore rise from Sankara's ashes like a Burkinabe phoenix? Sankara did change the colonial name of his country from Haute Volta to Burkina Faso and sided with the late Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi in his Pan-Africanism and anti-French colonialism rhetoric. Alas, the young captain, who wanted to change his country and Africa, quickly sided with Gaddafi. He had aimed to be Africa's king, but his throne was buried and his ideals evaporated. Traoré sounds like an eloquent leader who speaks about the economic and social development of his country and the complete withdrawal of French military forces from his country and beyond, like Sankara. He is more worried about the fate and immediate needs of his population and ending the suffering of the people. Once security returns, his fight for development will be high on the agenda. As we conclude this video, we reflect on the remarkable legacy left behind by Thomas Sankara and the impact he has had on the struggle for African emancipation and self-determination.